Well, David, thank you for that kind introduction. It's a privilege to be with everyone here and to work with David again. We've known each other for several years when he was doing work on our Princeton University campus, which has been a great legacy of what he's built and what you're continuing to do now. So I thank you for that. I also want to give honor and attribution to Julia for your opening remarks. I was deeply struck by them. My wife has a chronic illness, so I tend to think of the medical system from the patient perspective and how incredibly difficult it can be to negotiate those shoals. And it was helpful for me to think from the physician's perspective of the challenges that they face in their calling. And Kathy's remarks struck me also as a former senior executive in the finance sector. It made me smile and think of that world and the parts of it that are both dehumanizing and indeed perhaps humanizing. David asked me, as perhaps you heard, he asked me to give a few remarks, almost to be a hinge, if you will, or a pivot from thinking about the dehumanized and painful and brutal part of the work world, regardless whether you're a CEO or a secretary, but also to share some stories from my work of organizations and individuals that I've seen who are trying to do it a bit differently, to run their businesses and their careers a bit more humanely, if you will. So I've been asked to share some stories, which I'll do. But before that, I'd like to have a moment of real somberness before, hopefully, some uplifting things. Today's the 75th anniversary of a different 9/11. In 1938, something called Kristallnacht happened over in Germany. We had our 9/11 here, September 11th, and as you know, Europeans say day, month, year, so their 11/9 was our 9/11. Theirs was 75 years ago. It's when the Nazis went through the streets of Berlin, looting and smashing windows of any store, shop, or home or synagogue that was owned by Jewish people. It was called Kristallnacht, or the night of crystal, the night of broken glass, because of all the shattered window panes lit up the light with the fire in the broken glass. A terribly dehumanized moment in and of the workplace. Would you mind joining me in a short moment of silence to think of that pain and that brokenness? Amen. Thank you for sharing in that moment, which may not be covered by a lot of the newspapers, but it's worth thinking about. Now, broken glass is a metaphor, whether it's the broken glass from Kristallnacht or from the Twin Towers not too far from here, from our 9/11, or the quiet broken glass we might feel in our respective cubicles or factories or fields or towers. I've been asked to talk a little bit about, it's warm up here. If you don't mind, I'm going to strip down. Not completely. So, there we go. Don't worry about that, that's fine, thanks. The work I do at Princeton University is, this is our mission statement, the Faith and Work Initiative is what I launched about 6 years ago. We explore the question of trying to conduct theoretical research into and develop practical resources for this intersection, this vortex of faith and work. We pursue it out of multiple religious traditions. It's not just a Christian thing by any stretch. We focus on the 3 Abrahamic traditions, saying, what does it mean to be a practicing Jew or a practicing Christian or a practicing Muslim and to go into work? And what role might your faith play in shaping and informing who you are, your leadership, your ethics, your sense of purpose and meaning and calling in your work? I've been stunned at the level of interest and response. The courses I teach are hugely oversubscribed, and it's not because I'm a particularly good teacher. It's because the people, the young folks, are really interested in these questions. They want meaning and purpose in their life. They want to make money, sure, but they want to do it in a certain way, and that's not just the driver. That's hopefully a nice byproduct of their work. And they're stunned to think, whether they're atheists, agnostics, or people of faith, they're stunned to think that these ancient religious traditions actually have something to say, something real and edgy and helpful to say about interpreting and shaping and informing the workplace. Let me talk a bit, but I won't really talk about my research. I've been asked to tell some stories, so I'm going to tell some stories, David, as you asked. So whether you sit at the top of the totem pole or you've gotten to the top of the ladder, I can't tell you how many CEOs, I do a fair bit of advisory work with CEOs and C-suite leaders who are trying to connect the dots between faith and work to create a culture that's a healthy culture in their organization. I'm going to tell you some of those stories, and maybe they'll give you a bit of hope. But I'm staggered to see how many leaders get to the top of the ladder, and they will tell me, I wonder if I leaned the ladder against the wrong tree. I got to the top, but so what, or why, or what now? But it's not just the people at the top, it's also people at the bottom of the organization. So this is the head of HR for the company you work for, right? So whether you're in the galley and the lowest level doing the grittiest, dirtiest, hardest work, or whether you're at the top, it seems that faith can matter, and we'll talk about that. And then there are those who have an epiphany, and they say, wait, I don't have to do it this way. I could do it differently. And that's what I'd like to talk about. And all the stories I'm going to tell, some I know for a fact that the person or the organizations that have done this have been motivated by their faith. And others I'm not quite sure whether they have or haven't, but it's still some powerful stories. So I'm not going to show too many more PowerPoints. I think I've got maybe one more. Here we are. So my talking points. I'm going to talk about some stories at an organizational level and at a personal level. Let's start with this. A little bit dark and maybe hard to see. Let's see if this picture's any better. Now we'll go back to the first one. So I'll just keep that in the background. One of the projects, research projects I'm working on is something I'm calling sky pilots. Sky pilots. Has anyone ever heard the term sky pilot? Just raise your hand. All right, I might have a problem when the book comes out, since only 3 of you raised your hand. Sky pilots is a term that we first know its etymology traces back to 1863 in an article. And sky pilots is an old term referring to a clergy person, and more specifically, a chaplain. And the first usage wasn't a chaplain in a hospital or a prison or the military. The first use of the word sky pilot was a chaplain on a boat. And the sky pilot back in that day was, you think of a pilot who's steering a boat, was helping to steer a boat through treacherous waters. There's a phenomena called workplace chaplains that goes on. We can all think of chaplains in hospitals, prisons, military. We have images of those. But believe it or not, there are companies out there, most privately held, but there are a few publicly traded companies, and I'll talk about both, who are employing workplace chaplains, men and women who are on the payroll to help meet the spiritual needs of their employees. They're trying to help humanize the work. If you were to count, you would count 128 people in this photograph. They're men and women, people of color, Caucasian, different religious traditions. These are the chaplains of Tyson Foods Company. 1 in 4 meals that we eat in this country that has a protein product in it, poultry, beef, or pork, will be produced by Tyson Foods, whether it's chicken McNuggets at McDonald's or something you buy for your home. This isn't a commercial for Tyson Foods. I'm very close to this, so full disclosure, John Tyson, the chairman, is a personal friend of mine, and I've done a lot of advisory and consulting work for them, so full disclosure of any conflict of interest here. But they have a fascinating experiment going on, a fascinating experiment. They have workplace chaplains. They have more chaplains on their payroll than some denominations have clergy. Their plant in Mexico has 8 chaplains right now, and I was talking to their CEO, a Mexican national, and he said their plan is to treble it over the next 3 years. Why? What do? Are they running around proselytizing and trying to bring everyone to Christ? No. Some of you may know, and I wrote a book called God at Work, where I talk about 4 different modalities, 4 different ways that people manifest or bring their faith at work, 4 different ways it could show up. And expressing your faith is only one of the 4. What they're doing is offering spiritual nurture and succor, a balm in Gilead to people who are lonely, who are scared, who have broken families, and who do difficult, tough work. It's sometimes easy to think of having a healthy workplace if you're in IT or the software business. You think of free food in the cafeteria, foosball, bring your pet to work. It's pretty spoiled life. Most of the employees, or the team members, as they call them at Tyson Foods, 110,000 of them, the vast majority of them work on factory lines producing the food that we all eat. It's dangerous work. It's hard work. They don't make a lot of money. And yet, those people can thrive. There's dignity in that work. And Tyson Foods tries to, even with all the issues they have, from animal welfare issues, environmental issues, immigrant issues, they try to take care of their people, even though it's a publicly traded company. When Mother Industries would have had immediate layoffs, they try to defer them or neutralize or balance workflow. And they have these chaplains who walk the floor. That's all they do. They walk the floor and say, David, how you doing today? Or Julia, how you doing today? They speak multiple languages, most of them. They represent a variety of traditions. They're mostly Christian, but there's Catholic, there's nuns, there's priests. And they even had an imam as one of their chaplains at one point because one of their factories is predominantly populated by immigrant Muslim employees. They have a concept of what they call being faith-friendly. I'll put up, and again, this isn't a commercial, but I want to give an example of the boldness and the creativity that you could do in a publicly traded company. Now, to be sure, this has been top-down driven. John Tyson has personally invested his capital as a leader into these set of core values. They made a major acquisition about 10 years ago, and John realized he needed to articulate maybe what people sort of knew to put together the core values. And there's 2 things, probably a little bit hard to read in the back, but there's 2 things I want to draw your attention to. One is that they say they strive to be faith-friendly, not faith-based, but faith-friendly. There's a big difference. Faith-based means you're privileging one religious tradition over another, whereas faith-friendly means you're friendly and open to all faiths, even atheists, which is a worldview. In my nomenclature, atheism, agnosticism is a faith. It's a form of how you see and filter the world. It's your Weltanschauung. So they're striving to be a faith-friendly company, and having workplace chaplains is just one piece of it. Those chaplains serve as social service agencies in many ways, as well as offering prayers and comfort to people. I was with their head chaplain one day. We were driving somewhere, and he got a call. He said, excuse me, David, I got to take it. And it was a Hispanic woman who was being sexually harassed by her boss, who was a white male. And she was intimidated, and she was afraid to complain or issue a complaint through the HR department because she was afraid that that would put a whole set of inquiries into some of her friends and family who were not legal. She was legal, but she was afraid of it could bring other people down, and she was afraid she'd get fired. So she told the chaplain, and the chaplain said, this is a reportable offense. Let me help you with that. We'll do this in a way that protects you. And sure enough, the chaplains protected her. And that manager was, I believe in the end, was dismissed, actually, not just reprimanded, but dismissed. So the chaplains help people who are the widow, the orphan, the alien, as the scriptures say. Today we'd call them the undocumented worker or the single mom. So this faith-friendly, they actually say we strive to honor God. amazing that they would think about this. By the way, their chief marketing officer gave a presentation once in Canada to other chief marketing officers and showed this just as part of the introduction of putting forward their marketing campaign. And he showed this slide, about 30 PowerPoint slides he had. And at the very end, he was mobbed by people, and he sort of puffed his chest out and said, wow, I did a great job. Everyone wants to talk to me. They didn't want to talk to him about the marketing campaign. They just wanted to talk about this slide. They said, what? You strive to honor God? You're a faith-friendly company? How does that work? Don't you get sued all the time? And actually, John Tyson once said, well, heck, we get sued for everything. We might as well get sued for something we believe in. But in fact, they've not been sued over this. I would argue, and I'm doing research, as I said, into the sky pilots, into workplace chaplaincy. It's a critical reflection to look at the strengths and the weaknesses, the pluses and the minuses, the risks and the benefits of having workplace chaplains, because you can have abuses of workplace chaplains, to be sure. But they're trying to do it, what I would argue, in a professional and high-quality way. This, I would argue that if you pay attention to the human soul, and whether you have chaplains or not, that will actually, and strive to be faith-friendly, that you'll actually be preventing lawsuits because you're talking about things that are going on anyway. And you can train and educate your managers not to be afraid of requests for religious accommodation for religions you don't understand. One other thing that's unusual up here, if you look, most core value statements I've seen with different companies, they say, we are this, we operate with integrity, we are excellent. They say it as if it's true. And when Tyson first put their first set together, I said, Johnny, you're not. You're not perfect. You personally are not perfect, nor is this company as a whole. So you'll notice the language "we strive" is used several times in their statement, recognizing, speaking for a moment out of the Christian tradition or theologically, that we're fallen, we're broken, or we're screwed up is maybe the non-theological way to say it. We do that which we know we ought not to do, as St. Paul said. So striving, which is a strong word, look it up. It's not just we're thinking about it or we're trying, but we're striving every day to do these different things. So that's one story about an organization. And by the way, there's others that are doing it too. There's a Coca-Cola Consolidated Bottling Company, also publicly traded. They have workplace chaplains. Another company that has them told me that, and I can't identify the company, but they were having negotiations with their union workers, which tends not to be a friendly event. And 3 women made an appointment with the CEO and said, I'd like to talk to you about something about the upcoming negotiations. And he met with them against the lawyer's advice. And they said, we want to have a conversation just about one thing. And he said, yes. He was kind of waiting. What was the ask going to be? And she said, the lady said, I know there's going to be some horse trading. You're going to want to cut this. We're going to want to ask for more there. But one thing we just want to put on the table now that's non-negotiable, don't you dare cut the chaplaincy program. Don't you dare cut the chaplaincy program. And that's all they wanted to say. Then they left. Another company called Packmore, a small privately held company, the owner realized at one point that he no longer knew every new employee by name. When they got over a couple hundred people, I think they now have about 450 employees. So that's when he hired workplace chaplains to come and be the face, the soul, the spirit, which he had tried to be as the founder CEO, but no longer could do as a practical matter. It's easier to do this in a privately held business, to be sure, than in a publicly traded business. There's a lot of blowback if you're in a publicly traded business, more of a case you have to make to your shareholders. But it can be done and is being done. The big railway company, BSNF, they also have workplace chaplains, not as in the same way that Tyson Foods do, but they have on retainer. There's actually chaplaincy agencies, companies that train and have chaplains that will sort of rent a chaplain or hire a chaplain. You can have in-house or external ones. And they have these agents who will come in whenever there's been a railroad crossing fatality or major injury, which sadly enough happens more than you might think. These chaplains are flown right in right away to help with the grief counseling and things like that. Here's a different company, building on, but moving a little bit away from workplace chaplains. Some of you may know the Ingram family businesses, one of the largest privately held companies in the States. It's based in Nashville, Tennessee, and a little bit hard to read here, but the title is called Dimensions of Organizational Health. And you'll see as you go around the wheel, I realize you probably can't read it, but there are 4 different quadrants, and the lower left quadrant between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, they call spiritual. Wow, spiritual. And then they're recognizing that the human being is constituted of mind, body, and spirit. And whether you're religiously or spiritually inclined or not, all the way back through the beginning of human history and even the Greco-Roman philosophers all recognized that there was something called the soul, something called the spirit. And how do we tend to that? How do we nurture that in the workplace? And they have a number of things. They strive to be faith-friendly. They've also picked up this language I use of being faith-friendly. They have workplace chaplains. This particular part of the business is the barge business, the inland waterways. Ingram have about 40% of the barge traffic on the inland waterways. That's also dangerous, hard work. And they have sky pilots that they work to serve not just their own employees and their own barges, but throughout the industry. Let me shift to tell a different story, and this is maybe a bit more at the personal level. It's probably not appropriate for me to name the company, but as I said, I do a lot of work with different CEOs and C-suite leaders. And there's a large multinational bank that I'm doing some work with their whole senior leadership group. They've taken the top 100, 150 officers and are putting them through a series of training programs about culture and ethics and values. They're trying to retool. They've listened to the critique from Occupy Wall Street movement. They've listened to a lot of the millennials are saying of not liking what they see going on in the banking arena with products that don't really offer any value or limited value, or products that are misrepresented, sophisticated structural finance deals that, of course, make the corporate bankers, investment bankers a lot of money. By the way, I'm a former one, so I get it. I'm not against making a lot of money. But some of these products have had a certain toxicity to them, as we all knew from 2008 onwards. So this CEO is actually trying to remake the soul of this organization. We get these senior leaders together in groups of 12, and the opening exercise we do is we ask them all to tell a story from sometime prior to them being 20 years old, maybe even in their early years, teen years, or even younger, of when they faced a difficulty, a personal difficulty, and what they did to try to overcome it. These are people from all over the world that come to this. They're from South Africa, they're from Asia, they're from the UK, they're from the US. And most bankers I know, particularly at the most senior levels, we all put our game face on and we're all pretty strict and pretty tense and would never reveal sort of our inner vulnerabilities and our inner fears. Back to that cartoon with the guy in the ladder at the top, it is lonely at the top. And a lot of those people are just as broken and just as hurting, maybe even more so than the person on the factory floor. Yeah, they've got more money to insulate themselves from life's problems, but it doesn't mean they're not broken or hurting. So we open with these stories, and I thought when we first did it that they wouldn't play ball. They'd all sort of take something light and gloss over it, and we'd only take about 10 minutes to do it. We end up spending now about an hour and a half on this exercise, and the stories the people tell are extraordinary. One woman told a story. She's of Indian descent, was raised in England, and when she and her twin sister would walk to school every day, there were a bunch of bullies, a bunch of hoodlums, really, tough guys who would hurl insults at them, call them derogatory names, mocking their race and their gender. So they would always take a wide path around these, go across the street to walk by these boys. And one day, she was walking to school by herself because her sister couldn't join her. Her sister was homesick. And she decided she was going to walk through those guys and not walk around them. And she did. And they were stunned, and they didn't say a word. And like the Red Sea, they parted, and through she walked. And ever since then, she's had the courage to fight against prejudice, to fight against racism, to fight against bullies. And there's workplace bullies just like there are high school and grade school bullies. And we've just learned there are football bullies, in fact, if you followed the Miami Dolphins story. Another man told a story of how his life was just hunky-dory. Everything was great. Growing up in a middle-class family in Boston until his mother got cancer and died 6 months later. His father lost his job. He had to quit college, essentially take care of his father then, who became broken, and take care of his sisters and raise them. He had to take 3 years, 4 years out of his life before everyone sort of stabilized and he could go back and resume his college experience. Another person told a story from South Africa of dealing with intense racism back during apartheid. And on these human stories go. And after they've all told these stories of how they overcame something painful, an obstacle in their younger years, we then ask the question, how do you think that might be consciously or subconsciously influencing your leadership style? And what might you do more of or less of in light of these characteristics you learned and developed from that? And again, the floodgates open. They all leave the program intensely bonded as a team. They were strangers, really competitors before, and they leave bonded as a team because they remember their stories of brokenness. But they're turning those stories into empowerment and possibility. So I'd like to close by challenging you all to think about the possibility and empowerment that you could have in your own place of work, in your own form of leadership, that you might become a sky pilot no matter what you do. Thanks very much.